Hello and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema, the podcast that goes to the cinema, sees a couple of films each week, rates them out of 5, stays at home and watches a couple of things. There might be TV shows, there might be films, rates them out of 5. Gets an average and then sees where has the money been better spent this week. Who is winning the battle for our eyeballs? Is it Netflix or is it cinema? My name is Tosin and I'm the host. I'm based up in the United Kingdom in a place called Bromsgrove, not that far from the second city, Birmingham. And joining me as always on the Isle of Wight are Sharon Bollen.
Hello.
And Holly Nesline is our London correspondent, joining us from guess where?
Hi.
Hi. Right, cool. I was actually trying to think about this. Like, when we do these intros, I've been trying to think, what are the things that, what are the things that identify us? And I know that, Sharon, you're really big into our book to film adaptations. Because if there's a film that's based on a book, you've probably read the book. That's pretty much what's going on. With Dune Chapter 2 coming up, that's a pretty cool thing. I was offered an expert who is really, really big into their sci-fi and the sci-fi book to film adaptations and everything like that. And I thought, I think we might be able to do a Dune Chapter 2 special kind of thing afterwards. Because I did listen to the audiobook of Dune, all 26 hours of it, before... Yeah, 26 hours of the book. The book is longer than a day.
It didn't take me a full 26 hours to read it.
Well, if you add everything up together.
Yeah, I suppose, and they're slower, aren't they? Audiobooks are slower than actually reading.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. A lot of driving up and down the country. And I think we could do something with the Dune thing. And Holly, I mean, I think... You are kind of, how on all these TV shows, like, your X Factor or Strictly Come Dancing, whenever you have all these judges, there's always one judge that's kind of like, it's like the soft one, it's like the happy one, it's like the sort of like, if you excuse the sort of horribly gendered term, den mother, who's sort of like, oh, it's okay, it's fine, everyone. And I figure that's who you are, Holly. You're the one, because I remember last week we spoke about, I actually said the words, if Holly had seen this, she would give this a 5. I actually said, because I was like, that's what Holly is the one who I feel like you appreciate that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to make a film, and therefore the effort and the time needs to be awarded by at least one extra star that most other people would give it.
Yes, I think that's fair.
All right, cool. Although,
except in some circumstances where I cannot bring myself to do this. I mean, Monsternado being a key example.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If we get to the point where even you cannot muster up the goodwill to say things good about a film, then that is really, really bad. That means that the film has really just kind of like tanked it. But anyway, we will see what the films that we talk about this week will do. And we're going to start in cinema. But before that, I have gone back to my usual thing of not being able to get out of the house to go to the cinema. But when I was actually looking at the films that were on this week, I was like, I don't think that there's much out there. I'm not sure whether you guys found the same thing.
I didn't even look this week, but but when I looked last week, what was coming out, I was thinking, actually, I'm not that bothered. And when I saw the trailers for the last 2 times I've been to the cinema, I was thinking, not that bothered.
I mean, I'm booked in to see Dune tomorrow in the IMAX, which will be very exciting. But obviously, that's only available for tomorrow, so couldn't have done that any sooner. Also, Cinema Buddy has been on holiday, which is clearly unreasonable.
Staff!
I know.
How dare you!
I know, it's not acceptable. So, but we are probably going to see Wicked Little Letters tomorrow as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
as I've seen that.
Yeah, but my thing was that it seemed like everything that's actually out in the cinema at the moment, we have already seen or reviewed, which was weird because I know that we had this whole thing where for a while people were avoiding Marvel movies. So if a Marvel movie was coming out, you knew that people were going to try and avoid the week after the Marvel movie. There'll be nothing else. But this is weird because I know Dune is coming out soon, but the week before Dune, nothing. And I'm wondering whether this has to do with last year we had what's it called? Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, which was released a week before Barbenheimer. And And people were like, yeah, Barbenheimer kind of like took all the oxygen, and so Mission Impossible didn't do what everybody was expecting Mission Impossible to do. And I'm wondering whether this is what we're seeing now, that we have, I'm pretty sure no film got released last week. Like, no new film went on wide release last week. There's a Polish movie, there is a Japanese anime, there is, but if I'm looking at the films, okay, Wicked Little Letters, I guess maybe that was released, but you guys saw the preview screening of that. We've got Bob Marley, One Love, Wicked Little Letters, Madam Web, Migration, Mean Girls, Pepper's Cinema Party, not saying that, Raiders of the Lost Ark, okay, re-release, and Sami Swoj Polsaczek, which is a Polish movie. And it's, yeah, nothing was released. I just thought it was really weird, because I was thinking, oh, I can't leave the house, but even if I couldn't add anything new to the podcast, because we've spoken about all these things pretty much. But
we, by the by, walked out of Mean Girls.
I heard that, and I really wanted to go see Mean Girls to see why you walked out of it, and to see whether we had found something that just was like, something that you were going to be Scrooge like about.
It's just not good. Not good.
All right, cool. Now, I will wait until that shows up on TV, and then I'll find out if it was a walk out, if I agree with your stance, with your moral stance of walking out of Mean Girls. All right, cool. So let's go to cinemas, and let's start off with One Love. Sharon, tell me a bit about One Love, or to give it its full title. It seems to be the full title is Bob Marley, One Love.
One Love, yeah. Well, as the full title, Bob Marley, One Love, suggests, it is about Bob Marley. And this is a period in his life, particularly focused on, is the period when Jamaica was riven by sort of civil unrest towards like the mid-70s. And Bob Marley was well known in Jamaica at that point, was, a national star.
Yeah.
And he was going to do a peace concert to try to unify these sort of the rival factions, these two political factions that was like basically tearing Jamaica apart. And because of this peace event, he became a target of sort of different factions, and his actual house was assaulted, and he was shot, and his manager was shot. And for the safety of his family and his band and people around him, he actually relocated to London for a period of time and just lived in London. And while he was there, he obviously began to see a bit of the British culture, about how punk was sort of forming and how other musical influences were just like showing and being influenced. And so he thought he'd wanted to do like a new sound inspired by where he's come from and where he's going, and obviously his sort of abiding faith, which is as a Rastafarian.
Yeah.
And it basically, the film is about how he and the Wailers, living in London, produced the phenomena that became the album Exodus.
Yeah.
And how Exodus then suddenly was like this springboard for reggae in the UK.
Yeah.
And how we would say, you saw the influences in the UK in like the ska movement, how suddenly you got this fusion of like, British music influenced by punk and then influenced by reggae, and you have this sort of complete fusion. But it's basically, the story is about how the making of Exodus and all the influences that came to bear, how the influences of his life, of his background, the fact that he is a mixed race child, his father, or dual heritage child. His father was a white Englishman, his mother was a black Jamaican, and how he was, grew up as a yellow boy, as he was called in Jamaica.
I always wondered why he was so light.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. I always wondered why he was so light, but I never looked it up.
Yeah, his dad was white British, but he was a colonial sort of officer in Jamaica.
Oh yeah.
Had very little to do with his son, very little to do with his mother, and how as a young man, just like a teenager, basically, he got inspired by the Rastafarian movement, and how he basically became a just passionate Rastafarian who believed that Haile Selassie was the second Christ.
Yep.
That's who he believed it. And he sort of based his life believing that that the Haile Selassie was who he said he was. And throughout the film, there's these images of his father and the influence his father had on his life, even though his absence in some ways was a big influence, and how Haile Selassie, his absence, but his presence again was like a big influence. And there are some scenes where you see this symbolically, his father and Haile Selassie sort of almost become merged in some scenes.
Yeah.
Where you have this imagery of him riding on a horse, though Haile Selassie famously rode a white horse, and in the film he's riding a black horse. I don't know if there's a sort of something more involved in that, but when he, famously Haile Selassie rode this sort of big white horse, didn't he, when he re-entered Addis Ababa? Because I know that because my dad was there.
Oh, wow.
Of course. So he marched into Addis Ababa, marching behind one of only 30 European troops who marched into Addis Ababa with Haile Selassie. But my dad was one of those 30.
It's amazing.
Part of Gideon Force. So I knew a lot about Haile Selassie, more than most people probably do. So I knew all about him. But my friend I went with had no idea who he was. So a lot of the Rastafarian stuff sort of passed her by. But regardless of that aspect of the film, it's sort of, you hear the music, you sort of get that passion, you get that feeling of just what motivated and how he did bring sort of basically reggae to the masses, especially European and
So I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues with that I have, which are part of the reason why I'm not particularly looking forward to. This was not on my list. This was not one of those. I'm gonna make the deal with my wife and promise to do the dishes for the next 15 years if I could just go watch it. It wasn't a film I was gonna do that for. And one of them is that it's a music biopic, and they tend to follow a certain formula, and they tend to not really give you anything new. Although, I mean, the last couple of ones, like, Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody, I was like, didn't know she was in a same-sex relationship. And this one, I'm like, didn't know Bob Marley's dad was white. So maybe they are giving you something. But does this do anything other than your average music biopic?
Holly, do you want to answer that one?
No, I don't think it did. It was beautifully done. I really liked it. But I don't think it gave you it. Is there any magical insight to give to most people? Probably not. Mm-hmm. He was a very talented musician and his story was incredibly interesting. And arguably, quite his music was and his life were quite, transformative in the positive impacts they had on other people. I certainly learned things watching it that I hadn't known.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that much about him beforehand anyway. So that wasn't difficult. So watching the film, it didn't change the earth, obviously, but it was a beautiful depiction of the life of somebody who was quite interesting. And didn't entirely gloss over his negative traits. Mm-hmm. Also didn't dwell on them. It's one of those ones that's quite interesting. It's only passingly mentioned that he is not that great at monogamy and quite a lot of children, and that all of the other children as well.
His family was involved in making the film, so make of that what you will.
Yes, well, absolutely. And it was that the existence of the many children being raised by his wife was, all his children seemed to live with them.
Yeah.
And she looked after them, they just weren't all hers. So I thought that was quite, I won't say it was mildly interesting. I've seen that done before in Cry Freedom about Steve Biko, which you may remember from my favourite films. It is never explicitly said in that film that he has had multiple. He's also a bit of a philanderer. And you sort of figure it out. But it took me years to realise that was actually subtly mentioned in there. And the fact that he had, at least one child with somebody else, you wouldn't get from watching the film.
Okay, but back to One Love.
Yes. So it was all, and it was the same with One Love, is he you don't realise all of these things until it's mentioned as an aside. So I think it probably didn't overly dwell on things that maybe he warranted some criticism for. I don't know. That's probably
quite uncritical of
yes.
Well, but I mean,
but that's not. But is that what is there?
That's just the music biopic. It's just the music biopic.
Yeah, I think that's cut par for the course, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing. The criticism wouldn't bring anything to the party.
Well, essentially, let me put it this way: when it comes to a musical figure, when it comes to musical figures, I have decided that I don't want to watch narrative movies made about musical figures. I want to watch documentaries. Like when it comes to musical figures, I think you get a lot more from a documentary than you get from like a narrative film, because I'm just kind of like, yeah, you're just gonna give me like, no, we've seen it so many times. There's a tried and tested formula that very rarely gets broken, and it's kind of like
Priscilla was like that, beautiful, very beautiful, but
yeah, but Priscilla wasn't about the person doing the music. It's so I think yeah, it's hey. Anyway, so how many stars would we give this?
I think I'd go 4 personally.
I was thinking good 3 or a 4, because I do like Bob. I've got a Bob Marley CD in my car always. I bought Legend I remember when he died.
Yeah.
I remember the music when he was alive, because I'm that old. But I do, yeah. So it made me sort of go, oh yeah. It was an interesting conversation. I had my friend I went to see it with, because we had a complete role reversal. She knew nothing about Bob Marley and could barely understand a word that was said because of the Jamaican sort of patois that they used.
Yep.
She could barely understand it, but she sort of enjoyed it. And I was in exactly the same position when I watched Whitney with her, the Whitney biopic.
Yeah.
I knew none of the music and was like barely really, it was that interested, but I saw it as a friend.
Yeah.
So she was in the same boat, but we both enjoyed it. So I think I'm going to go with a 4, because I loved the music. I thought the guy who played Bob Marley was really charismatic.
Kingsley Ben-Adir.
He was great.
If you're going to watch it, you're going to have to tune in to the sort of the Jamaican accent, the Jamaican rhythm and pattern of speaking, because I know a lot of people just couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought it was a fun film. It was interesting about some of the Rastafarianism stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I think I'd go with a 4 for it. I think as the music biopics goes, I think it was one of the better ones.
All right, cool, good stuff. Yeah. Cool. One final thing: Tosin doesn't get to go to the cinema, so Tosin starts complaining about things he doesn't like about films he's never watched. And the only thing I would say about this is kind of like I'm getting on my high horse again about underrepresented people on screen and all that. And I know that this has Kingsley Ben-Adir playing Bob Marley, and it has Lashana Lynch playing his wife, who are both British and have Caribbean heritage. I'm pretty sure about that. But at the same time, I do wish that they would start casting Jamaicans in films like this, or casting Africans to play Africans. But anyway, never mind. That is
to an untrained ear, I thought their accents were good, but I wouldn't like to say I could safely identify the difference between a decent Jamaican accent and an actual Jamaican accent.
Yeah, Holly, that just reminded me. I've got a great article to send you about the use of the African accent in Hollywood movies. Or shall we say African accents on Hollywood movies? And I was reading it going, yes, I've been saying this for years.
Is it the single accent? Is it the fact that everybody sounds like they're from generic Africa?
Wherever that is. Everybody sounds like they come from Hollywood, Africa, where they're going, yeah, that'll do. And they just go, and it's pretty much that. But anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about.
Yes, send me the article, please.
And if anybody's interested, I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put the link to the article in the show notes for this. But it was one I cannot remember who it was written by. I'm going to look as we're talking, and I will try and find out who it was written by, because I read this thing and I just kind of I pretty much punched the air and said, yes, Yes. But anyway, let's move on to Netflix and let's talk about Rustin. Now, Rustin is here we are. It must be like Oscar season or something. There's so many biopics around, but Rustin is a biopic. But I think like if there's one good thing that's happened in the biopic area is that people have stopped trying to give you cradle to grave biopics where they go through a person's whole life, and they've more or less sort of focused on events. And this is pretty much like it's pretty much a biopic of the march that happened in Washington that led to Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It's pretty much a biopic of that, but it focuses on a character called Bayard Rustin, who I had never heard about before, who was essentially the person who came up with the idea of the march and did everything to make this march happen. Because it's one of those things where I remember, you hear about Martin Luther King going, "I have a dream today," and just think, yeah. I look at the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of people in the center of Washington, and you just take it as read that, yeah, that happens. And it's not until probably with me, you grow older, you move to like England or something like that, and you start thinking, hang on a second, the admin, how did they get all those people in there? How did they get all those people in there without, like, the powers that be thinking that there was about to be a mob thing happening, and without them bringing out tanks? And how did that not become a bloodbath, essentially? And this film talks all about Rustin and how Rustin went about making sure that this actually happened. But it also points out the fact that Rustin was a black gay man living in the, I think it was 50s, 60s. And so he's kind of almost been brushed under the carpet, and he's kind of like been put out of history. And even in the film itself, you have all these different factions of Black America. You have the NAACP. You have all these other groups that I had never heard of. I did not even know existed. There was one called like SNCC or something like that. And they keep showing you all the different heads of them and how they're also jostling for position. And some of them are like, allied with Kennedy's administration. So they're just trying to protect their position. And some people are saying we shouldn't do this march because if we do this march, it is going to be seen as an aggression thing. Kennedy's trying to do something diplomatic. This will be seen as trying to undermine him. And all these different factions that went into that were trying to just before this could actually happen. What could happen, what his relationship was like with Martin Luther King, how it wasn't all cut and dry and it wasn't all heroism. And that I really, really enjoyed because I was like, okay, now this is great. This is going through, this film almost goes through, this is the boring backroom stuff that needs to happen for change to happen. And what Rustin actually had to go through for change to happen, and the fact that even though he's pretty much like, what happened is that this film was produced by the Obamas, and the Obamas, they gave Bayard Rustin the Congressional Medal of Freedom, even though he died years before they ever got into office. And I think that's because I think he was a real influence to Obama with Obama's activism before he became president, and they think this guy's he's been wiped out of history. And even in the film, in the run-up to the March on Washington, there's people trying to wipe him out because he's gay. There are people just trying to push him out of there. And they're saying things like, you have Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright shows up for pretty much one scene in this film. And I think it is a vindication of getting a good actor to not do much time-wise in the film. Because in that one scene, he just communicates everything about this character who is saying like, well, we've done a lot of good work here, and this is after everything had already been organized. But if there was one person here who had like, certain predilections that you think would like, ruin the point you're trying to make, would you allow that person to come onto the march? And would you allow that person to be in Washington with you? And all the way you see all these different fights that Rustin is fighting, and all the time not losing sight of his activism. Coleman Domingo, who plays him, is great. It sent me down to go find out more about Rustin and what he did and everything. I thought it was great. But Holly, you talk. I'll take a breath.
I thought it was an absolutely beautiful film and really interesting. I hadn't known about him beforehand, and I found it very interesting seeing his internal battles with his own identity, his simultaneous acceptance and battles with his own identity as a gay black man in the time period, and how he also didn't wish to be defined by. He simultaneously, I think, almost wanted to be defined and didn't want to be defined. I know it's, completely contradictory, few sentences. But there was a sort of conflict in himself in whom he was attracted to and how he felt about himself that was very interesting.
Yeah.
So you didn't just look at the fascinating, position on civil rights. You looked at the fascinating position of somebody who is a brilliant and flawed individual who is battling their own demons.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it captured him beautifully, and really, it sort of gives you shivers film in places. I think if I remember rightly, I got a bit damp-eyed towards the end, but of course, as you know, I cry at everything, so that's not that much of a statement about anything. But it really, the emotion of it really got to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it quite inspiring. I'm gonna be as somebody who has this long-held thing of I want to change a country. In my case, Nigeria. I wanted to figure a way of making that country be what it could actually be, and I found it inspiring. But I think that, but at the same time, I almost kind of like, how do you actually go about doing it? And I found it quite interesting that I saw something else that was talking about the film earlier today that sort of said, that the film did, the March on Washington doesn't really play that big a part, and it's like, and it is, they pretty much only show the final line of Martin Luther King's speech in there. But I thought that's because that wasn't the point. Yeah. For me, I thought it wasn't the point. The point wasn't about, we're going to try and recreate this whole thing, because quite frankly, you can't. You cannot recreate that speech. You cannot recreate that moment. But it was about, for me, it was about everything that he had to do up to that point. And once they go into Washington, it's like, okay, it's been done. We've won. We've won. And the speech, not the point. The thing, not the point. It was about the unheralded, uncelebrated legwork that just happens, that needs to happen to get to that point in the first place. Yeah. And even the way the film ends, where there's a scene right at the end of the film where people get invited to go meet the president, and Rustin's reaction to it, which I'm looking at and I'm going, they that must have been true. That must actually have happened. Rustin's reaction to being invited to go speak to the president is kind of one of those things where you go, ooh, if that happened, this guy was a one-off. This guy was and we need more people like him. So I really liked it. I would give it a 4 out of 5.
And I'm going to go 5 out of 5.
Oh, I knew it.
I always go one up on you.
I knew it. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I don't think it has a chance in hell of Coleman Domingo winning the Oscar. He is nominated for Best Actor. It doesn't have a chance in hell. But it's kind of like...
he's not going to win it, but I think that he would be absolutely deserving of it. I think everybody who is up for an Oscar, I think was an inspiring performance.
Yeah, well, I have to admit, it is. I've seen Coleman Domingo in other things, and this is one of those performances where I was like, yeah, I don't see him anymore. He's disappeared, because I've never seen him do anything like this before. He's usually charismatic and everything like that. And he's usually like the best dressed person in any scene he's in and stuff like that. But he was just really, really good in this, but yeah, as I said, no chance in hell. But I mean, every year there's a couple of people. In some years with the Oscars, you look at the categories and you see that there are 4 people who are in that category because you need 5 people to actually have a category. Well, there's one person who's already been anointed and is going to win it. And I feel like we have that this year with the Best Actor thing. So they had to put other people in there. You've got Jeffrey Wright and Coleman Domingo, who personally I'm really, really happy to see them because they've been doing great work for years. But I think it's for them, the nomination is probably the prize, because I don't think either of them have a chance of winning it.
No, I don't think they will get them, but I would be absolutely over the moon if they did.
Yes. And going back to so Holly, I've sent you the article that I was talking about. It's called The African Accent and the Colonial Ear. And it's written by Maxine Sibihwana. Yeah.
Ooh,
Maxine Sibihwana. Yeah, yeah. Talking about people being nominated, it starts off talking about Forest Whitaker winning an Oscar for playing Idi Amin, and the specificity of his accent. Anyway, now let us go back, and every now and then on this show, what we do is that one of us has gone to see something in the cinema. Another one of us goes, you know what, I don't care if it's already been reviewed, because unlike me, when one of you reviews a film, I kind of go, well, don't have to watch it now. I'm going to go find something else. But some of us, like Holly, go, you know what, I'm still going to go watch that film. And so Holly went and watched Madam Web. And after Sean gave quite an illuminating review of Madam Web last week, Holly, what did you think?
So it was a very, very quick overview again for anybody who hasn't yet heard Sean's critique. It is a Marvel film about a character called Cassandra.
Okay, may I stop you there? Okay, now this is something which, obviously, as somebody like me, I'm a bit of a geek with these sort of things. I think it needs to be pointed out, because when you say it's a Marvel film, people immediately will assume that this is from the same people who brought you Captain America and the Avengers movies and everything like that. It is not. It is a Sony film, because for business reasons and law reasons, way back when Marvel didn't have money, they sold the rights to some characters to people like Sony and Fox and all that. And those people have been trying to keep hold of those rights, especially after once seeing what Marvel has done, and they realize that these things are very... So anyway, this character is originally based on a Marvel comic book. Yes, I will give you that. However, there needs to be a delineation made between Marvel movies, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Studios, and films that are made by other people with Marvel characters in them.
Yes, this is very true.
Yes, so this is from Sony, who have Marvel characters in them, but it is not the MCU.
It is not the MCU. It is about Cassandra Webb, whose mother was investigating spiders when she was pregnant with her, and she died suddenly. And Cassandra has been raised not knowing, in foster care, being angry towards her mother for having taken risks in her pregnancy. And she has grown up to become a paramedic and in New York. And along comes a day when she is helping somebody get out of a car, and the car goes over a bridge. When there's been an accident, and she drowns and is then resuscitated. And after this, she starts being able to see glimpses of the future, and she will see something, and then it will then happen immediately afterwards.
Yes.
And as a result of this, she comes in contact with 3 young women who are being hunted by somebody who had known her mother many years ago in the jungle. And she takes it upon herself to protect these young women and find out what's going on exactly. She is played by Dakota Johnson.
Yes.
I have absolutely no idea who else is in the film, though I suspect we'll be able to.
Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, or Merced, I can never know how to pronounce that. Tahir Rahim.
Yes.
Those are people.
Thank you. Yes, they are people. They are also in it. I found it a very enjoyable film, actually. It's B-movie. I think is what we concluded at the watching. I will happily whack it on in the background again in the future, because that's just fine. And it was fun. It was silly. It wasn't profound, obviously. Wasn't expecting it to be profound. But it was a nice watch. That's probably a silly word, but was very glad to have seen it. But it's not, obviously it can't really live up to everything else from the MCU, because it's not from the MCU, so it doesn't have all of the same feel to it.
It's from Sony, who don't know what they're doing. And I'm going to try very hard not to rehash my critique from last week because Sharon's already heard it. Sharon's already heard it. Anybody who's listening has already heard it and has heard what I think about Sony continuing to make superhero movies, besides the Spider-Verse movies. But yeah, good.
I liked it. Was glad to have seen it, but I can understand why it has been widely panned.
So how many stars would you give it?
I will give it a 3.
Okay.
Because it was quite enjoyable. And it was a middle of the road B movie.
Yes.
So for what it was, now that which may not be what they were trying to make it, but for what it was, it's that nicely.
It's just
I find Dakota Johnson a bit of an oddity as well, as somehow to me it always feels like she's playing the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't think there's anything to support that, it always to me feels like Dakota Johnson plays Dakota Johnson.
I can see that. And Sharon, to get you interested in this, it occurred to me that two of the most scathing reviews we've had of films have been starring Dakota Johnson because she was obviously in Persuasion.
Don't remind me of that film.
And we do have all 3 of the 50 Shades of absolute unspeakable nonsense.
Yeah, I mentioned last week, I said that, I don't believe that anybody is looking at the scripts for these Sony movies and thinking, this is going to really help my career. I feel like they're just looking at it and that Sony must be spending loads of money to get these people into it. Because Sydney Sweeney is a star. Sydney Sweeney is, she was known for Euphoria and everything like that. She is in one of the sleeper hits of this year, Anyone But You. And I don't think it has to have been a money thing. It just has to have been a money thing for them to be in this film. And I think that Dakota Johnson, I hope that she's rich because I hope that she's been paid a lot for these films, for the 50 Shades movies, for Persuasion, for this, because she is building a weird career of stinkers beside films like, Bad Times at the El Royale. Bad Times at the El Royale. That she was in that, and that's an excellent film. And I'm just kind of like, so it's kind of like, so Holly, I know what you're saying is like, what do you get from Dakota Johnson? What does she give you? And I don't know that I know. I don't know that I know because every character looks the same, has the same hairstyle, has the fringe. It's kind of like. So
I'm always slightly annoyed by her fringe, and that's a completely unreasonable thing to be annoyed by, particularly as I take great issue with people, judging people they don't know on their appearance. But her fringe manages to irritate me. Who gets irritated by somebody's fringe? I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm very much in favour of fringes, but her fringe always annoys me.
So no Claudia Winkleman fan then?
No, her fringe scares me.
She's like, what is she hiding? What is on her forehead? What is it? We must know.
I mean, also incredibly impressed by the quality of Claudia Winkleman's hair. I mean, it's quite wonderful. So, So okay. I think maybe we've established that I have a fear of fringes on TV.
Yeah, a fear of fringes. That's actually difficult to say. Fear of fringes on TV. All right, cool. Fear of fringes on TV and Madam Web, 3 stars from Holly. But bear in mind that as we have already established, Holly is the nice one who will always try to find something nice to say. All right, but now let us go on to The Abyss. And so Sharon has obviously been trying. Sean has dived into Japanese stuff, chasing after the high of getting a 5,000 view video with his Godzilla -1 review. And you seem to have gone the other way, and you've gone not the other way, but you've also decided to go, I'm going to go and see some stuff that's not in the English language. I'm going to go see something in other languages for a while. Mostly
Scandi.
Yeah, sort of Scandi, sort of like Western European, because you went Flemish last week, and this week, where are we going? Are we going, Swedish?
A Swedish film, yes.
Swedish film, which is named, the English name of this Swedish film is I have a feeling that somebody was thinking, if we named it this, some people might watch it thinking it's a James Cameron movie from the 80s. So
but it's called The Abyss. And as we said about the last film, Madam Web, that it was, it's a B film. I think this is basically the streaming version of straight to video.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
I don't think there's any other way of describing a lot of what's on Netflix, to be honest with you, I think is the straight to video films of today.
Yeah, I think that is fair. Netflix has taken over that market.
And I am one of those people who I get to this point of the week and I think I've got the podcast to do. And I think by sort of Tuesday, I get gripped with a sense of panic that I haven't seen anything. So sometimes if I have an evening, I will think I've got to watch something. I can't have another week where I've got nothing to review. So sometimes I do have that moment of mild desperation. So this was a film I chose out of slight mild desperation. Because it said, this was in the top 50 of top 10 films in 100 countries. I thought, I'm in. I don't actually believe it because I've seen the film now. But anyway.
Well,
I mean, it's and that's I think for me on Netflix that's the equivalent of giving you a plastic toy in your breakfast cereal.
It's like top 10, yay! Top 10 is gonna break. That's actually very, very apt. It's like top 10. It's like Top Gun. Hope you like it, but it's gonna break in 5 minutes. It's gonna break.
Yeah, it's one of them. Anyway, so this is a film. It's a disaster film. From Sweden. It is basically The Abyss is a mine, and this is set in the town of Kiruna, which is basically a mining town. And they have been built on this. People of generations have worked and mined this mountain for its resources for generations. And basically they have hollowed out the mountain. And every now and then, because of this sort of shift in it's like an unstable part of the world. Every now and then, these voids will appear, or they get like sinkholes because basically they live on top of a hollow mountain now, and there's this event has been coming where more and more of these sort of sinkholes are appearing and these chasms, and basically this film is the big one where the town has been on the verge of horrible things happening, and now this has happened. The mountain has decided that it's had enough. It's going to open up and swallow this town. And our main characters is a plucky woman who has been working on the mine for many, many years. She's estranged from her husband, and she's got a new partner. And he decides this is the time that he's going to go and visit her and meet her two teenage children. And the night before everything all kicks off, her teenage son has decided that he's just going to go out with his mates and have a jolly time before he decides on whether he's going to go to university or stay. And
on the edge of the thing in the ground.
A crisis, sorry.
Is it on the edge of the mine in the ground, or the edge of the big hole in the ground? I'm guessing.
They go up and have a picnic, right next to where the abyss is about to open up. And so, in your typical disaster film fare. Mum goes to rescue her children in peril, and then they all start off together. Then they'll get separated and they go and do things, and the story unfolds, and then people end up doing reckless, crazy things, just because they can, and then there's the choices that we probably wouldn't make, but obviously there's foolishness, there's heroism, there's mums doing what mums do, all in Swedish and subtitles. So it's a straight to video as they come.
Was it a bit like the film Troll? Yeah, which was is that Swedish as well? That was also on Netflix, and it fell.
Yes, I also saw that.
Yeah,
I think it's Norwegian.
Norwegian. Okay, yeah, Norwegian. Yeah, it's.
I think it's Norwegian.
Yeah, but it felt like it was a Scandinavian take on your American disaster movie or your American big creature feature. But that I felt like that felt a little bit more high quality than straight to video. But did this feel a little bit like there's sometimes I feel like because America has just such a big hold on the cinema landscape worldwide, you have different places that kind of go, we're gonna do our take on an American genre movie and stuff like that.
Exactly that. Yeah, all the actors are sort of probably good looking.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah,
no
yeah.
sort of
Well, but come on, it is Swedish, and I'm pretty sure that is not. I'm pretty sure that is not a stereotype whatsoever. That everybody in Sweden is blonde and good looking.
Yes, very attractive. The entire population.
I've seen the Skarsgård brothers, and from what I understand, that's what everybody in Sweden looks like.
Also very tall. Very tall. The Skarsgårds are disconcertingly tall. Not normal.
So this is it's basically the Swedes saying, we can do it. We will take your disaster movie and we'll raise you. You've got volcanoes and earthquakes. We've got hollow mountains. So take that, Hollywood. And so that's what they've done. So it's stupid, as these films are. It's funny in places. Don't know if it's intentional or not, but I found a few bits laughable. And it's got what you want from a disaster film. So basically, it delivers what it's supposed to do. It's not going to win any awards. It's not going to sort of be. I won't remember what it was about in about 3 months' time. In fact, I had to look at what it was called this morning because I'm thinking I know I've seen it, but I can't remember what it was called, and I only saw it about 3 days ago. So yes. It's not going to break any records, shatter anyone's illusions about the Swedish film industry, but it did what it said. So it was never going to be anything more than a 3, and I think it probably made the 3. There's a few scenes that I think would have Sharon shouting at the screen. Come on, but I knew what I was getting into, and it delivered what it was supposed to. So it is a 3 film.
The disaster film version of Madam Web.
So I just love the idea. It's like what you said, though, have Sean shouting at the screen. Now I just have this sort of like little sadist thing that just wants to make Sean watch this film now. and just watch him for the second where he goes, "What are you doing?"
There's a scene at the end where, like, one of the big rescues, someone's in peril, and then they have to put themselves at great risk to save them. And a few times it's just like, come on.
It's like, pull the other
one. I feel we need a goggle box of Sean watching films. Just for that.
Well, you say, as I said last week, I do have my. Unfortunately, Sean is not with us. I don't think he's feeling that well. So get well soon, Sean. But the thing is, I do think that Sean went to see Madam Web last week, and I will maintain because he wanted to get annoyed. He wanted to get annoyed, and he wanted to complain, and he wanted to huff and puff in his seat and sort of like mentally throw things at the screen, and I think, if you ask me, that is why Sean went to see Madam Web last week. So a Sean goggle box, I think, would be a great idea, because not to fulfill stereotypes, but out of all of us, I do think he complains the most. He complains. So, okay, yeah, that is it. So 3 stars for The Abyss. 3 stars for The Abyss. And all that's left to do this week, because we only have 2 things in each side, or 2 things in cinema, 2 things on Netflix and Friends, is to figure out who do we think has won this week.
Has had some 4s, and we've had a 5. So, and then we've had 3, and then we've had tie.
Okay, so Sharon says tie. Holly says Netflix.
Yes, because of my 5 for Rustin.
Yes, due to your 5 for Rustin, you are correct. Netflix and Friends has just about pipped it this week by 0.25 of a point of a star. Oh, yeah, 0.25 because 3.5 for cinema, 3.75 for Netflix and Friends. Right, cool. So that's it until next week, when I think probably 3 people who will be on this thing will have seen Dune Part 2. Maybe 4, but somebody has to go into negotiations and, give away quite a few, give away quite a few privileges and everything like that. Maybe he has to buy 2 cinemas and see the film in 2 in 2 sittings. Second time just showing halfway through the film. Yep. Okay, cool. That's good. We got this now. But we'll see you part 2. I think we might have finished watching. I think Killers of the Flower Moon we'll probably talk about next week. And I know, Holly, you and I have started watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Prime Video. I don't know whether you finished it.
Not finished it.
Me neither. But maybe next week we'll be able to find out what we think about Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Donald Glover and Maya Erskine. Well, until next week, please do get in touch with us or get in touch with Holly on Twitter at Netflix vs Cinema. Get in touch with get in touch with her on there. You can speak to us on YouTube, like somebody who got in touch with us and mentioned on one of our reviews on YouTube this week, which I shall not read out because I think this person was just trying to get a rise out of us. So and was not helpful. So goodbye to you. Say good day to you, sir. And but Sharon will probably pick that up. And until next week, it's a goodbye. It's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Thank you ever so much for joining us.